system for us to relate to one another and to care for one another. But unfortunately, it is the system in which we live. Um, One second, let me pull up my notes. So, we're going to talk about money this morning. While money was not one of the things that I heard growing up that you should not talk about in polite society, that was reserved for sex, politics, and religion, there is certainly many taboos around discussing money, discussing debt, discussing how much you make, and when it is appropriate and not appropriate to discuss. Another thing I want to say up front is that debt is morally neutral. You're not a bad person because you're in debt. You're not a good person because you have all of the money in the world. People make choices as they live and as they respond to the situations in their life, some of which require taking on debt, some of which require taking on debt for good reasons, some of which require taking on debt for bad reasons, but having debt in and of itself does not make you a bad person. So I'm going to start by telling you about myself. So, for those of you who are not aware, I'm 31. That puts me squarely in like the bottom third of the millennial generation. So think about that when you're thinking about what you hear on the news about millennials and debt and money. Because there's this interesting thing in people talking about millennials where they think that we're teenagers and that we don't have careers and houses and cars and that we're not adults. So I want to dissuade you of subscribing to that belief. So I have a lot of debt. I am probably approximately $200,000 in debt. The majority of that is my student loans. I went to a state school for undergrad, came out with about $20,000 in debt, which is fairly reasonable. It's not an unheard of amount for people coming out of undergrad. I also worked through undergrad. I did not work full time. I worked part time. I had various work study jobs. I interned at the campus faith community that I was a part of. I didn't have a lot of, I didn't do a lot of traveling, or I was good with my money and still came out with $20,000 worth of debt. Then I went straight into seminary because I realized when I was in college that I was called to ministry. That looked a little different than I thought it would. Originally, when I started seminary, I thought I was going to be kind of a typical local church pastor. I put that in air quotes because there's no such thing. further, um, none of the interviews are outside of normal work hours, so you can't have been a pastor yet, so you're taking time off from whatever your job is, uh, which means you have to have time off. You have to be able to get to the interview. Are you seeing how all of this adds up in the expense and the debt? Now, since then, I figured out that I'm not called to be a local church pastor. I have no desire to be Bill, as wonderful as Bill is, and as much as he does for the church. I am very much happy in the hospital setting as a chaplain. That is my calling, which happens to be one of the better ways to make money as a clergy person, because you're paid based on what the hospital thinks is an appropriate salary rather than what the church thinks is an appropriate salary. I should also say, since I graduated, I first did more training. So I was making and where I did my training, I was paid well, but was still paid sort of in residency, sort of salary stipend for 2 years. Then again, to be a hospital chaplain, you have to be board certified, you have to have all of the assessments done, you have to do the interview, you have to do this, that, and the other. So I couldn't get a job as a hospital chaplain. I did hospice chaplaincy for a few years. So you know that hospice is very hard and definitely calling, no matter what. It's not paid terrifically well. So I was still making about what I was making when I was doing my training. I then was fortunate enough to know somebody who knew somebody to get me into my first hospital job, which was about a 20% increase on what I had previously made. So I'm starting to make money, but I've got $175,000 worth of debt. I have moved, I did this the other day, how many times was it? 16 times in a decade. Moving is not cheap. So I've got the personal loans for moving. I've got my first real, quote unquote, real job, which is a whole other story about what makes a job a real job. And I'm finally starting to make just the tiniest bit of money. And then I moved to the job that I have now, which is a fantastic job. It is now I'm making about twice what I initially made out of seminary. And I still have $200,000 worth of debt. I can't qualify for a mortgage because we're in the student loan forbearance. So the mortgage companies all assume that I'm making the maximum, not the maximum payment, but the standard 10-year payment, which I think they calculated out to $2,500 a month or so. Now, again, the interesting thing about this, they won't give me a mortgage for $1,500 a month when I have been paying $1,500 a month in rent for the last 10 years. So even though I have shown demonstrably, practically, that I can afford to pay this, I can't get a mortgage. Now I say all of this not to make you feel bad for me, because at this point I am doing well. Like, I make the money I need to make. I'm able to make my own payments. I'm able to start saving a little bit here and there. But again, this is for me with the advantages that I have, which included a chance to move in with my mom for about 2 months in between jobs. And if I had not had that, I would have been even further in debt, because I would have had to pay the rent. I would have had to pay the Cobra health insurance rate, which is, I think, more than my rent was at the time. I would have had to pay for all of the assorted things that come with getting a job, again, getting interviews, getting clothing, getting all of the training, and etc. So again, all of this is to frame what does that mean. And this is, we haven't even stepped outside of capitalism and money. So we're going to do that now. We're going to look at what it means to be in debt. So I'm sure most of you know we're in a pandemic. Part of that has been in the news for the last 3 years is about masking and what masking means and when you should mask and who should mask and how you should mask. So I have two stories I want to share about masking. One is personal, one is in the news now. So the Emmys just happened, presumably. I haven't actually watched any of the award shows, they may not have been recently, but again, this is in the news cycle now. So the Emmys happened. There are lots of pictures of all of the people who were there. There's this really interesting phenomenon in these photos that people have noticed. There's one actor, Jim Hader, who is wearing a mask at this award show. And there's two interpretations of this. Interpretations are always risky because anytime you put your own subjectivity onto somebody else, rather than just observing what they're doing, you're risking misinterpretation. But there's two interpretations of this. One is, oh, he's so wonderful, he's being cautious and raising awareness and wearing a mask. And then there's the other interpretation, which points out he's immunocompromised himself, and none of the other people at this award ceremony care enough to wear masks to keep him safe. I have no idea personally which of these two interpretations is true. I would assume that there is a bit of truth in both of them. But it raises the question of how are we indebted to one another when it comes to our physical health, physical care for one another. So a similar story around that. I work in a hospital. I see people with all kinds of different illnesses, chronic, acute, different health concerns. I visited with a patient who I'll call A, who is approximately 60 years old. They found out the morning that I visited with them that they had stage 4 cancer. They just found out the day before that they had cancer at all. And they found out about 3 hours before I visited with them that they had stage 4 cancer. Now, they almost immediately asked me to go ahead and pull the chair over and sit down with them. And maybe a minute or two into our conversation, asked me to take my mask off because they hate them. Now, in all practicality, I'm not supposed to. This is against the rules at the hospital. So I paused for in all honesty, not very long, maybe about 10 seconds before I took my mask off. And we talked for about an hour or so. Actually, I visited for about an hour or so. They got a call from their brother and they asked me to stay with them. They reached for my hand while they were on the phone with their brother. So I'm sitting there without my mask on, holding their hand, kind of leaning over in my chair because I doesn't get that so close to the bed. Yeah, one of the oncologists comes in to oncology nurse practitioners comes in and they do sort of their initial assessment. When we wrap up our visit, I go back 2 or 3 days later, and initially they're sort of like, I'm doing all right, I don't really need to talk to you today. Slowly the conversation keeps going, and they're about 5 minutes. We do the same thing, go ahead and put the chair over. As I'm saying, oh, and you go mask off, they say yes, please take your mask off. And this time we spend about an hour and 45 minutes talking. Now, again, there are two at least two interpretations of this. More than that, because I'm going to get into it. But one is that I did the wrong thing. I should not have taken my mask off, no matter how much I likely wearing it. That I could have gotten sick. That, like, the mask just should have stayed on. And if that meant that we didn't talk, then we didn't talk, and that's that. The other interpretation is that you should take the mask off anytime somebody asks, because if they don't care, then why should you? So there's this interplay of embeddedness around physical health, around the understanding of who should wear a mask and when, and around who gets to decide who's wearing the mask. So stage 4 cancer is going to put somebody in the immunocompromised state, if not immediately, in the next few days when they start their chemo or radiation or whatever treatment they get for their cancer. So the risk to them is not minimal, even if it has been up until this point. They're not the only one there. There's also a roommate. Now I'm probably 15, 20 feet away from the roommate. They've already been in the room with roommates. So that is sort of a negligible risk embeddedness at this point. But I'm in the room. There's some amount of risk to me. Where is that reciprocity fall in this conversation? Do they have any expectation that they should be keeping me safe and allowing me to wear my mask? I think this is one of those cases where there's a couple different interpretations going on here, but I think all of them can be argued for strongly, but it's about what is your commitment to. And again, for me, because I was there as a chaplain and wanting to be a source of support for somebody who is new to stage 4 cancer diagnosis, that for me was enough reason to take the mask off, because that was what they wanted. But there are other patients who have asked me to take my mask off, who I have not taken my mask off. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't have an answer for you on that. Just objective facts. That for this patient, I took the mask off. For others, I have not. We're in a hospital. The rules are not to take the mask off. I did it anyway. They asked me to. I will leave that in your hands. Let's see. Let's talk Reddit for a moment. So I don't know how many of you are online. There's a wonderful, terrible website called Reddit, which is a lot like Ask Abby or Dear Abby. People can submit here's the situation, and excuse the language, it's called Am I the Asshole? So the readers get to submit their responses. You're the asshole, not the asshole. Everyone sucks here. No assholes here. There's a whole variety of stories that make it on. Some of them are slightly terrifying. Some of them are very hilarious. A lot of them are about relationships. Not surprising at all. Relationships of one variety or another. Parents raising kids, wedding couples talking about what they've done for their guests. So I'll give you 2 examples. A mother-in-law breaking her son's house. That's an interesting story. So I'm gonna give you 3 quick examples. So one is about a father whose kid was trying to open a I don't remember how old the child was. It was at that age where like a lot of the leaders were saying, your kid doesn't know how to do that. But this father decided, I'm just gonna let them struggle with it until they figure it out. This is a life lesson for them. If they're not gonna starve, like they've got other food they can eat, but they need to figure out how to be self-sufficient. And then the father was upset that their child, unsurprisingly, 4 hours later, after they'd walked out of the kitchen, I think having successfully emptied the can, that's a little immaterial, was like no end of upset, would talk to him, would like, again, how would you react to somebody that would you struggle or something? So ask, again, am I the asshole here? A little bit concerningly, there was some disagreement about who, if he was or was not, but what does it mean to be indebted to your children as you raise them? What are the expectations for parents raising children? There's another story about a couple getting married who wanted, in lieu of guests, or guests rather, wanted their guests to purchase professionally made puppets because they had met in some sort of puppetry activity and thought it would be fun for their guests to have puppets to wear at the ceremony. Their family were upset that they had to spend $500 to $1,000 on professionally made puppets that they were then going to have to wear throughout the ceremony, trying to figure out how am I supposed to eat at the reception. This is just uncomfortable. How do we like this is strange, and we're not puppet people, so why are we making us buy these puppets? Again, there's some argument on either side there. The wedding is about you. Shouldn't you get to celebrate it however you want? Does that mean you get to tell people that they have to spend this amount of money to be able to attend? The final one was about a mother-in-law who broke in to her son and daughter-in-law's house because she had an issue with something about how they were cleaning and like, we're not cleaning this, and so they went out of town, but it wasn't the first time she'd broken in, so they had cameras, and the police ended up getting called. It was a whole thing. So again, where are the layers of expectations of what it means to a relationship, who and how, and where do those boundaries get set? And finally, just for a little bit about why I think capitalism is an awful system. Think about the legitimate needs that people have for life. Think about food, think about medical care, think about housing. And we as a society have decided that things like insulin cost multiple thousands of dollars a month, even though they cost dollars to produce. We've decided that insurance costs, again, multiple hundreds of dollars a month. And even though you've been paying every month, you still have to pay some amount out of pocket for the insurance. Another person's experience, I have to schedule for routine lab tests. So I call because that's the only option if you're interested in online, in person, you have to call. They open at 8, I called at 7:30 the first time, thinking maybe they've got somebody there, we'll just scheduling before they start. We'll give it a shot. It's not going to be a message that we're not scheduling yet. So I sat on hold for a few minutes. That one's sort of on me. That was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot, see if it works. So I called back later in the day during their business hours. I sat on hold for an hour and a half Now, again, fortunately, this is routine lab work. It's not an emergency. I have the ability to sit on hold for an hour and a half. What if this had been an emergency and I did need it? What if I was somebody working an hourly job who is not going to be able to pay for something else that I need because my boss saw me sitting on the phone for an hour and a half and decided that since I was on personal time, they weren't going to pay me. So just to sort of wrap it up, who in this scripture passage is the asshole? Who in life is the asshole? Thanks be to God. Amen. All right, our hymn of preparation prior to communion is going to be More Love to Be of Christ, which is number 527.